Hello friends and fellow world builders. My name is AJ Winters and welcome back to World Builder. Last week we officially completed the 3 cities of our Trilands. I'm so excited! It means that today we get to dive into their fashion and apparel. Today is a bit of a fun episode where I get to dabble into my inner costume designer. There is a lot that we need to take into consideration when we're diving into the clothing style of a particular nation, or in this case, particular cities. Their climate, their resources, their occupations, their different levels in status, as well as their societal influences. So, no more stalling, let's bring on the fashion. There is so much we need to get into, and I thought about dividing this up into sections, but then I ended up with 4 sections per city, and that just seemed rather excessive. And we don't have an hour to sit around and talk about fashion. But if you do want an hour to sit around and talk about fashion, I may do some more fashion episodes in the future, so leave some comments down below if you enjoy this. But for now, let's start with the first city we created, the River City. They're situated in the middle of 3 converging rivers and sit on the tail end of the more humid region to the north. So, that's actually a really good place to start. Their climate, that would be a huge influence on their clothing. It would be warmer in the River City, but it would still have a breeze because they're on the coast of the continent, which gives me a bit of a Mediterranean feel. They would do more drapery. Things like cloth and loose hanging clothing would allow for more breeze and keep them cooler. However, taking drapery into consideration, the River City sits on a bunch of canals and the people of this city are going to go in and out of their flotillas, which is the name of our passage boats. Thank you so much to 1000 Backyards for that suggestion. And the thought of getting in and out of a boat with a long dress seems like an absolute hassle, so let's not do that to our citizens of our River City. Time for my trusty old sketchbook. So, we're looking at shorter skirts and dresses for the River City citizens. Also, something we need to take into consideration if they are getting in and out of boats and dealing with a lot of water is their shoes. I think, now that we have the Triton Trout leather from Serum 7.6, they should have some high-kneed waterproof boots, because it is made of fish scales, or fish leather, so it would be semi-waterproof. And that would be a really good idea for the fishermen as well. Maybe they have longer boots or thicker, compact boots so that they can travel through the rivers and fish. Maybe the boots even combine into the trousers, sort of an overall situation. Yeah, I like that. No one likes to get all pruny in the water. Also, I think going back to our everyday citizens, having those slimline boots as well as the shorter drapery seems like a really good mix for the climate. So I like where we're heading with that. Here's an example of the slimline boots of the citizens versus the chunkier boots for the fishermen. Given the trade agreement with Penarvois, I'd say that the citizens of the River City have access to that pink grain from episode 9, so they're able to have cloths and silks made of that material. But maybe they don't like the pink colours. Maybe they tend to lean towards whites, greys and blues in honour of their moon deity. So this presents an interesting challenge for those in my Discord chat and in the comments below. Let's find some wacky and wonderful ways to dye the clothing, whether it's the ink of a fish, the blood of a beetle, or the pollen of a flower. I want to hear your ideas. But coming back to colours, I think that the lighter colours like whites, pearlescents and silvers would be reserved for the upper class of the River City, the high priestesses and the nobles, because that's harder to achieve with dyes and cleaning the materials. Whereas the greys and the darker blues would be reserved for the fishermen and the citizens of the River City. I think that the fishermen would also wear more tight-fitted clothing as to not get in the way of their trade. So maybe let's revisit that overall design, or maybe even a one-piece. Where the everyday fashion of the River City would drape across the citizens in fine semi-translucent silks or woven cloths, the fishermen would sport a tighter fit with heftier fabrics and a tight belt to keep the waterproof Triton Trout leather pants and connecting boots in place. Okay, I'm really happy with that. So now let's turn our attention to Panavua. Now this is our agricultural city, so we're looking at field workers, people that collect wood and fungi from elsewood, textiles and fabrics workers, and the nobility. Back in episode 8, we talked about having lords and ladies in Panavua. Maybe the lords and ladies actually make up the governing system, like the 13 households of Panavua. We also talked about the climate of this city being a warmer climate with afternoon rains. This is actually because they are backed by mountains which separate their prosperous lands from the wastelands to the west. Maybe the rainfall does fall on their side of the mountain, which is why they have the River Pen, as well as the lush green fields of their valley. The grass is greener on this side of the mountain. But I do believe that the wastelands have some vicious storms that cross over to Panavua in their cold season. So maybe we need to take that into consideration as well. Given that we designed this city based on Egyptian, Babylonian, and ancient Athens influences, I dove straight into their clothing styles too. Being that this city is known for its fabrics, I think we should stick to that drapery and sash look. And I think also because the fabrics start off in pinks, maybe colour is all the rage. And the easiest things to dye would be peaches, oranges, and deep reds. However, even though Panavua and the River City are close and probably influence each other's fashion, I think that the citizens of Panavua need to be a little bit more practical, being that they're a farming city. So let's change those long dresses into pants and give them pockets. We can also adjust those sashes to be storage sleeves for carrying produce or children. This is a matriarchal society with a heavy societal focus on life, birth, and pregnancy, so that makes sense. Actually, that would influence the top half of these designs. Maybe we should follow in that Grecian style and actually have one-shouldered dresses or garments for things like breastfeeding. And if we dabble into cloaks, they should also fasten at one side or on the shoulder. I think we should also play around with a cropped cloak, because we need some ample movement for the fields, as well as child rearing. No one wants a cloak down to the floor when they have 5 to 6 children to wrangle. No siree. This goes for the men and the non-binary citizens too. I think it takes a village to raise children, or in this case, an entire city. I don't think there's any specialities in terms of gender. Everyone gets involved. It's a privilege to raise children here. I think we should also keep the style of sandal from ancient Athens as well as the Egyptians. Given that it's a summery, warm climate, that does make sense. I think the citizens of the River City also trade with them with their Triton trout boots, because during the season where the river recedes and they have those mud flats that they plant grains in, you're gonna want some enclosed shoes. So I designed some field working pants with pockets and gaps in the fabric for cooling. Sticking to the asymmetric top half, I fashioned a large button for fastening the fabrics. In regards to the cloaks, they are a heavier fabric to stay warm, but remain cropped and fastened at one side for ease in the fields and for raising children. As for our lords and ladies of Panavua, I opted for the more Greek influence with some jewellery and some belts, with the sashes becoming baby carriers or produce holders, and a looser fitting drapery to allow for pregnancy. And again, the asymmetric fastening style remains, as well as some hair braids, because I feel like the citizens of Panavua braid their hair to stay out of the way when they are working in the fields. And lastly, let's turn our attention to the northwest mountains of the Trilands, our mining city, which will be officially named tomorrow evening when voting closes for our patrons. So exciting! But let's focus on the influencing factors of the mining city. For one, their main trade of mining would definitely impact their clothing style, as well as the colder climate of the mountain ranges. And lastly, we need to take into consideration the monarchy in which they came from, and the traditional dress style of their nation. I've been looking into the traditional clothing styles of Russian, Croatian, Macedonian, and Mongolian clothing, mostly for their patterns and bright colours and warm hats. Oh, and if that Qing Dynasty era headdress from Mongolia looks familiar, that's because it probably is. I especially love the vest styles, cloaks, and coats from Macedonia and Croatia. So I think we can take some of those designs into consideration, especially with the mixing of furs from our giant bison-like creature too, which we still haven't named or designed, but we will get to that. So let's combine those different styles and see what we end up with, shall we? I started with the designs of the vests and heavier fabrics, focusing on colour and sashes and having some chunkier jewellery as well. One of the biggest influences in this city would be the mining, so I think that there's a level of popularization of gloves and leather cuffs to protect from the breaking of the crystal shards. But maybe that made its way into mainstream fashion. Maybe the citizens of the mining city always cover their wrists, either in drapery or in leather-bound wrist cuffs. That also offers us a unique design for our princess. But coming back to our everyday fashion, I think we're going to embrace colour and patterns the same way that the city architecture does. That's awesome. And it also distinctly changes its culture and vibe to the river city with their drapery and the farming city with their practical pants and pockets. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. I have adored today, especially with dabbling into fantasy clothing. That is my jam. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give this video a like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date with all the videos that we put out, and follow all the socials so you get all the behind the scenes content that we post on the regular. If you would like to join daily world building discussions, then you can head over to our Discord channel. Or if you would like some special behind the scenes content and voting powers, to name different cities, the voting closes tomorrow, then join our Patreon. I am thoroughly enjoying this journey so far, and I really hope that you are too. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you again next week.